So I'm just starting the recording now. We're going to be taking a look at three different Midrashim, because all three of these Midrashim present different ways of explaining and understanding what exactly is transpiring. So, before we begin, who's here? Oh, it's Alberta. Okay, very good. All right. But as the Midrash often... Hey, Alberta.
Thank you. Sorry for
Hi, how are you?
I'm always in good spirits. You know that. Life is beautiful.
Yeah. Come, have a seat.
No, I'll sit over there. Never mind. It's just that I got into the 10 minutes in between trains. So it is what it is.
All right. So again, we're discussing Korach and his rebellion against Moshe, and we're talking about what his motivations were. What was his rationale? Like what exactly was he claiming? Because it's not entirely explicit from the verses what exactly is going on. And we're going to begin, and because we're making a study of Midrash, we have to study the Torah like Midrash. The Midrash assumes that you are familiar with various verses, with psukim, with the story, and it pays very close attention to the language, word choicing, idiosyncratic turns of phrase, and development and structure and associated ideas that are connected chronologically within the text. So we're going to take a look right now at source number 1. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahos ben Levi. Korach took, and I'm going to point out, he doesn't say what he took, V'dasan v'aviram b'nei Eliyav v'on ben Peles b'nei Ruvain, as well as Dasan and Aviram and On ben Peles, who are all of the tribe of Reuven. Doesn't say much more than that. They took. What did they took? Don't know. Vayokumu lifnei Moshe v'anashim mibnei Yisrael chamishim umosayim. They stood before Moshe along with 250 individuals, but these were individuals of note. Nisiei Ada, these are princes of the congregation. Kiri'e Moed, people who are called for public meetings. Anshe Shem, men of distinction. So these are community leaders. This is the elite of the Jewish community. Vayikohu Moshe v'Aaron vayomru alehem rav lochem. They congregated against Moshe and against Aharon, and they said to Aaron and to Moshe, Rav lachem, you have taken too much, or you have done too much. Ki chol ho'eda, kulam kedoshim, the entire community, they're all holy. Ubesocham Hashem, and in their midst is God. Umadoa tisnasu al kahal Hashem, why have you elevated yourselves above the congregation of God? Vayishma Moshe v'yipol al panav. Moshe heard, and he bowed, he sort of fell down. Basically, it's an expression of distress and dismay. Vayidaber el Korach ve'el kol ado. So, and he said to Korach and to all of his assembled, Boker ve'yoda Hashem es asher lo. In the morning, God will make known those who are His. Ve'es hakodesh ve'ikriv elav. Also, those who are holy, and He'll bring them to Him. And those that God chooses, those are the people that God draws close. Zosasu, this is what you're going to do. He's creating a showdown. So all of you are going to take fire pans, you and your entire cohort. You're going to place fire on them. The simu aleim ketores, and on that fire, on the coals, you're going to place incense, lifnei Hashem, and you're going to offer them lifnei Hashem, before God. Machar, the next day. The isha yivchar Hashem hu hakadosh, the person who survives, the one who lives, because ketores have a penchant for destroying people who are not qualified to bring them. The one who survives, that is the one who God has chosen. Rav lachem b'nei Levi, and he turns the wording back on them. You have taken too much. You have too much. So these are the texts. And we have a lot of ambiguity here. We don't really know what's motivating Korach. We don't really know what their complaints are. They're making these vague statements of you have taken too much. We have Moshe essentially saying you're going to have a showdown to see who's been selected, and that's all set up. That's all set up with as a trial by fire, almost literally. So let's take a look at the very first Midrash. So this is from the Midrash Tanchuma. This is one of the Midrashim. And the Midrash over here is going to give some explanation here. And I'm just going to read this in the English. And Vayikach Korach, and Korach took. What did Korach take? Is really the question that the Midrash is asking. What did he take? So it's going to answer the question through what we call smichus haparsha, the fact that these topics are connected sequentially within the Torah. What parsha immediately preceded the story of Korach? It's the story of
this is the wife.
Tzitzis.
Oh, okay.
Tzitzis, right. So what parsha precedes this episode? Speak to the Israelites concerning the making of tzitzis. Korach stepped forward, turning. You just heard the page 2. Turning to Moshe, you say, put on a fringe of blue thread of techelas wool. What about a garment that is itself a blue colored garment? Would it not be exempt from the blue thread on the tzitzis? Moshe replies, it's obligatory to have the blue thread. What do we discuss within the Shema as well? We talk about the mezuzah. Said right. I'm jumping the gun. Moses replied, right. So said Korach, a garment which is all blue is not exempt is not exempt, and 4 meager threads do the trick. Korach attacked again. A room full of Sifrei Torah, would it need a mezuzah? Moshe answered, yes, it would. Korach replied, the Torah contains 275 sections, and they're not enough to fulfill the house's obligation to have a mezuzah, but these 2 scrolls, these 2 sections written in a mezuzah scroll will fulfill the obligation for an entire house. Moshe, you must be making this stuff up. So, upon reading this Midrash at first glance, it would seem that Korach's challenge lies in the detailed technicalities of a Torah discussion. The argument here revolves around a certain legal inconsistency in the system of commands prescribed by the Torah. A 4-corner garment has to have fringes, it has to have tzitzis, and one of those strings is supposed to be blue, has to be dyed by techelas. Korach asks about a 4-corner garment, which is entirely dyed blue, and he mocks the law that would require that garment to still have an additional blue thread. If the objective is to meditate on that single thread, because the blue reminds us of the sea, which reminds us of the heaven, reminds us of God, then if you have the entire garment that's blue, it's accomplishing much the same thing. Korach is essentially telling Moshe, you're looking only at the letter of the law, but what about the spirit? You're so weighed down by the details, but you're not paying attention to the larger picture. Go ahead.
Could it be that in between the lines, he's basically saying you're making all this stuff up, because Hashem is going to give a law, period. And it might sound stupid to us as human beings, or it doesn't make sense to us as human beings, and it sounds like he's right. Saying, you made this up, and you're not even consistent in how you're doing this stuff.
Well,
kind of idea.
Yeah, that's possibly it, but I'm going to take this a step further,
okay.
which makes it more than just him mocking all of this. Then he basically makes the same claim about a mezuzah. You have a little scroll that has 2 sections, but you have inside the room entire Sefer Torah. Entire Sefer Torah contains all the sections that the mezuzah has, and then some. Why? Just as the same question, why do you need to have a single blue thread on the string, on the garment, when you have an entire garment that's blue, that's being accomplished by the blue of the garment? And no, it's the same thing.
He's an idiot. He's using human logic and not listening to the words that Moshe gave over from Hashem.
Yeah, well, you're being very firm.
No, I'm just being literal.
Well, I'm going to pause it. Leave me alone. Why does
New ringtone?
I don't want her.
Havana, you like it?
no?
Sorry, it's bugging me.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So,
sure it bugged Moshe a lot more than
what
that.
do both of these stories tell us about Korach's rebellion? Was this rebellion really based on a disagreement about Torah interpretation? And maybe the Midrash is reading something deeper in the text. What exactly does it starts this off? Let's go back to source number 1 again and read verse number 3. And they combined against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why do you raise yourself above the Lord's congregation?" And the litvart here would be, for all the community is holy. Why do you raise yourselves? The argument voiced here is not a discussion about Torah. It's a strident call for equality and democratization. Korach attempts to undermine Moshe's position on simple democratic grounds. All the people are holy, and God is in their midst. We don't need leaders, we don't need intermediaries. And he uses the metaphor of the tzitzis, or the talis, the four-cornered garment, as well as the mezuzah. Both of these laws are symbolic, as I've said. It's to remind you about God. Well, why would you need to have a single independent thread if the entire garment reminds you of God? It's essentially by extrapolation, Moshe stands by the letter of the law. A blue thread is a fundamental requirement. A mezuzah scroll is essential for the full dictates. But Korach asks, why is it necessary to limit the symbolic act to a single thread, to a small piece of parchment? Why not extend it to the entire garment? And by the same logic, why not crown the entire people with Torah and with leadership? If they're all holy, if God utilizes prophecy and speaks to all of them, then why do we need to have that single thread or that little mezuzah? Why do we need to have Moshe as the prophet and Aaron as the high priest? Why do we need these individuals in leadership roles? Don't you respect the holiness of the entire nation, he's asking? Why do you view yourselves as holier than thou? So the tzitzis and the Sefer Torah become symbolic of the entirety of the Jewish people. Why do we need to have special, unique, small items when the entirety is here? And indeed, we're going to take a look now at source number 3. The Ibn Ezra suggests that it was the appointment of the Leviim to the Mishkan service that precipitated all of this unrest. And who did the Leviim replace? Well, let's read. Zehadavar haya b'midbar Sinai kashen ischalafu habechoros.
The firstborn, no?
Right. V'nivdalu halaviim. This is what happened in the desert of Sinai. This immediately took place after the firstborn were replaced with the Levites. Ki choshu Yisrael shemoshe Adonenu asa midai tuloses gedula le'echav gam libnei kahas shem karovim elav. So what is the issue here? The Bnei Yisrael are now upset that they've lost the office of kahuna to the firstborn, lost it to the Leviim, and the reason why Moshe took it away from them is because he wanted to give honor to his own family, the family of Levi. And the Leviim joined with him because they were upset about being placed under Aharon. They were only assistants to Aaron. Here, Aharon is now the priest, while the Leviim are merely his assistants. And further, if you're going to remove it from the tribe you're going to move it from all the firstborn, and you're going to give it to a singular tribe, then why not give it to Reuven, the firstborn? Which is why the people who join him are primarily from the tribe of Reuven and community leaders who are all upset about losing their positions of authority. Who are the community leaders? They tended to be the firstborn. So here you have the firstborn upset about the loss of all of this stuff that's now being allocated to Moshe and his family.
He's a good instigator, this guy.
Yeah. So the argument is moral. It's a democratic argument. And the Midrash gives us a halachic reading which supports this egalitarian line of argument. On this backdrop, there's a further pivotal detail of the story that we can now more readily understand. Let's take a look back at source number 1, because there's a large emphasis here within the text. Because what does Moshe say? He said to the Korach, "Come morning, the Lord will make known to him who is his and who is holy." He will grant access to himself. He will grant access to the one who he chooses. And then he says, tomorrow put fire, and the one whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, O sons of Levi. Moshe offers Korach the opportunity to act as high priest for the day. He's going to perform this Ketores, the incense ritual. And he uses a symmetry within his retort. Korach talks about we're all holy. And essentially what he says is that you're going to see who God chooses to be holy. And furthermore, he uses much of the same language. He says that, you Rav Lechem. There's a symmetry in the language between Korach and Moshe. And Professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz, a rabbi professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz, deepens this connection between the tzitzis and Korach, especially as part of the holiness discussion that we've just introduced, because you see that who's holy is he's going to highlight the fact that there's a fundamental difference between what does it mean to be holy. Let's take a look over here. This is source number 4. This is on page number 3. Right, it says, and you will see them that tzitzis, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, not straying after your heart or your eyes, in order that you may remember and perform all the commandments, and you will be holy to the Lord. The difference between these two perceptions of holiness is the distinction between religious faith and pagan worship. The holiness of tzitzis is not a given assumption, but a task. They were not told, you are holy, but a demand is made to become holy. But the religious consciousness of Korach and his followers, the entire congregation, is holy. Holiness is something bestowed upon one. So you have a fundamental difference between these two camps as to what constitutes holiness. Is holiness something that you strive for, or is it innate? Is it handed out? Is it given? The distinction between these two concepts is deeper still. In Parshat, this holiness is expressed in the almost sublime aspect of the life of faith and the religious mindset of man, that he's required to accept upon himself a task. Nothing is promised or assured. He's simply charged with a demand. But in the holiness of Korach and his group, man frees himself of responsibility from the mission with which he's been charged and from the obligation to struggle. So here we have an argument that relates to democratization and holiness. Is holiness a virtue innate within the Jewish nation, or is it something that someone must work towards in order to achieve? If it's the former, then there's no good reason to accept Moshe and Aaron over Korach as national leader. But if the latter is correct, meaning that it's something that one has to strive for, that holiness is a product of years of self-refinement, then Korach's argument begins to look exceptionally weak. Yes?
Can we suggest that in the Jewish people, there is a baseline of holiness or a strong potential of holiness, and then doing the work lights the fire of the holiness. Like you have a baseline that's there as like your DNA, your holiness DNA. But if you don't exercise your holiness DNA, forget about it, kind of idea.
Yeah, I would liken it to like a radio, like to an AM radio versus an FM radio. You have the equipment, but you still have to turn it on and you still have to tune it.
Okay.
Rabbi, this is a very generic. Korach never really asked himself that actually it was Moses the one that talked to God, so he has he's in a better position than what he's claiming.
That's true.
Okay.
Alrighty. So, now we continue. Now that's Midrash number 1. Midrash number 2, and this is source number 5. What did Korach do? He gathered, so this is right, another Midrash. He gathered the entire congregation and began to tell them stories. There once was a widow in my neighborhood who had 2 little girls, orphans. She owned a modest field from which they made their living. She began to plow the field. Moses told her, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Right? She began to sow the field. He said, do not sow the field with mixtures of seeds. These are all biblical commandments, kilayim. She began to harvest the crop, and he said, leave the gleanings and the edges of your field for the poor. She gathered the harvest, and he said, give tithes to the priest and the Levite. She gave it all to him. She sold her field, and there she basically gave up dealing with this agriculture with all of its taxes and levies and obligations. And so she sold her field and bought 2 sheep in order to clothe her children from their fleece and to gain profit from their offsprings and milk. They gave birth, and Aaron came and demanded the firstborn. As it says, every firstborn shall be sanctified to God. She gave him the lambs. And then she came to shear the sheep. And Aaron came, give me the first of the fleece. As God said, God says, the first of the fleece are to be given to Aaron. And basically, no matter what she does, she can't escape. She keeps having to give things away. She stood there crying with her 2 daughters, and this is again Korach speaking. He's using a bit of demagoguery and woving a personal interest story, a human interest story, and that is what they did to this desperate woman. This is what they do, and they pin it all on the word of God. So Korach is a bit of a storyteller, and the Midrash suggests a new argument in Korah's propaganda armory. Korach claims that Moshe and Aharon are abusing the Torah to their own personal gain. They interfere in the lives of every normal person. They're always making demands which they claim are based in Torah text, and therefore in God's law. But is it any coincidence that all of these gains go to Aharon and Moshe and their families? Korach has ample evidence at his disposal, and he manages to combine these facts with a perfect human interest story. Does this Midrash have any basis in the text? Possibly. 2 sources in the text perhaps allude to this. The first one is, if you take a look at source number 6, this is when Moshe sends for Dasan and Aviram. It says, Vayishlach Moshe likro Dasan v'la Aviram b'nei Eliyav v'yomru lo na'aleh. Moshe sent for Dasan and Aviram, and they said, we will not come. And when we continue, and he says, you took us out of the land of milk and honey. You took us out of Egypt, and you didn't bring us to any place. We're still stuck here in the desert, and now you're reigning over us. Vayicham leMoshe ma'od. Moshe got very distressed. Vayomer el Hashem, and he said to God, Eitel fenu minchasam. Don't listen to their prayers. Don't hearken to their sacrifices. Lo chamar echad mehem nasasi, v'lo harei osi es achad mehem. I did not take one of their donkeys, and I have not wronged any of them. Why does Moshe mention this at all? Doing something like, right? I haven't done anything wrong to them. I haven't taken anything from them. It must be that that was part of the criticism of Moshe that's playing out at this time. Yeah.
Weren't they the ones that saw him kill the Egyptian?
That's according to Midrash, yes.
So, I mean, there's history there. And all.
Yeah, there's always history.
Okay.
They're Jews, right? All right, another possible connection.
Stiff-necked people.
Yeah. Another possible connection is that what comes immediately after the story of Korach? All the tithings and all of the obligations that we have to give to the Kohanim and give to the Leviim. So that's source number 2. That does as why would the Torah have to reiterate and say these are your obligations and highlight it? Is because without the Torah getting involved, then people would always have the seeds of doubt and cynicism that had been planted by Korach and his cohort in their minds about whether or not Moshe made this demand through himself, or was this actually from God? So it was necessary for God to intervene and give the mitzvos explicitly, as well as provide miracles to completely remove all doubt from people's hearts. So number 2 is that Moshe and his family are profiteering off the system. Okay, that is Midrash number 2. Now we're going to take a look at Midrash number 3, which is source number 7. It's also the Tanchuma.
Okay.
Why did Korach create a dispute? Well, because his uncle, Eltzaphan, the son of Uziel, was appointed as chieftain over the tribe of Levi. Korach said, my father is one of 4 sons. As we know, that Kahas had 4 sons: Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, and Uziel. Amram was the firstborn, and his son Aaron became the priest, and his other son Moshe became the national leader. So, then who should become the leader of our family then? Who's next in line? Well, the next brother. That's me, Korach says. But Moshe went to the next brother. He went to the youngest brother in order to appoint a family chief. What's the foundation for this text? Well, if you take a look again at the very first source, because we start off with now comes Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahas, the son of Levi. Why do you have to go through this long genealogical list? It must be that genealogy was a source of friction. Why mention the genealogy? Because that is what Korach was complaining about. Now, it's interesting to think about what series of events precipitated this rebellion. What caused the feelings in the camp to such a degree that people came to question Moshe's leadership? The Ramban says that it takes place immediately after they received the punishment to remain 40 years in the desert, and everyone is angry, upset, and despondent and bitter. This was the Ibn Ezra sees it slightly differently. That it's, as we said before, it has more to do with people starting to lose patience with Moshe and Aharon seemingly taking positions of authority and privilege. Now, Korach seems to be an expert at weaving together all of these individuals and bringing them bring this motley crew together, because nobody seems to have the same agenda. As we saw from the Ibn Ezra, Korach wants to be the head of the family of Kahas, and he wasn't. His nephew was. The Leviim are upset because they're not Kohanim. The Ruvain is upset because Levi was chosen, and all the firstborn were upset because their office as Leviim were removed. They all have their own grievances. So, was it fueled by ideological egalitarianism or personal jealousy? Was it a feeling of no confidence in Moshe, accusation regarding his personal integrity? Or the Bnei Israel simply looking for a scapegoat after the decree to wander 40 years in the desert? And there's another question also. Who's the one stirring up all this trouble? Is it Dasan and Aviram? Is it the 250 chieftains? Is it Korach himself? As I said, each group seems to have its own agenda, yet they're all working together. The diverse arguments associated with Korach suggest to us that Korach's mutiny, rather than being a unified movement, might have been a coalition of several factions with very different agendas. Korach, the Leviim, Dasan and Aviram, the people from Ruvain, the 250 tribal chieftains, and the broader Jewish community. It would seem that most of these people are motivated to a significant degree by personal self-interest. And maybe this helps and explains our final source, which is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which says, Kol machlokas shehi l'shem shamayim, any argument, any controversy which is pursued for the sake of heaven's name, sofa liskayim, is destined to endure. But if it's not for the sake of heaven, if it's not in heaven's name, ein sofa liskayim, then it will not endure. What is the argument for the sake of heaven? Zu machlokas Hillel v'Shammai. It will be an argument in halacha like Hillel and Shammai had. One that is not for the sake of heaven's name. Zo machlokas Korach v'Adasa. This is a Korach and his cohort. The argument here is not directed towards heaven, it's directed towards earth. It's not about ideals at all. The ideals are just a foil for real ambition, the personal vendetta, and the desire for fame and power. Korach's group had no unified agenda other than toppling Moshe. It's for this reason that their issues will not be perpetuated, will not endure, will not remain. A moral or ideological truth lasts forever, but misplaced personal ambition at the expense of others will always be consumed by its own fire, just like Korach and his cohort were both figuratively and metaphorically. And with that, I'm open to